What was your biggest time out moment? Was approached by someone, and we talked about how we went to the same college and I showed him some of my artwork. He thought it was pretty cool and offered me an opportunity and wanted to talk more later because I was at work at the time. I met up with him and his girlfriend and he told about what he mentioned. As I say there listening, it sounded familiar and bam, it hit me. It was a pyramid scheme. It had nothing to do with art or any job prospects. I told him I wasn't interested many times in the nicest way possible but boy did they look pissed. I worked in a contact center several years ago. It was super busy and calls didn't stop coming. For some reason, my stupid boss removed everyone else from the queue for some stupid training, leaving me alone to handle all the calls. I messaged him a few times on Microsoft Teams, asking what was happening with no reply. After 2 hours, I shut down my computer and walked out of the company. I just recently withdrawn my last salary, so no regret whatsoever. Went to a friend of a friend's 35th birthday party. There were like 3 people there when we showed up. Birthday boy says everyone's in the basement. Okay cool. We go down to the basement. Someone's gym. They've got cool lighting. There's like 30 people dancing. After a minute or two we realize everyone in the basement is like 13. Nope. When a girl took me to a crack house. A girl gave me a marriage ultimatum while we were trying to fix our relationship. I almost immediately walked out the door. I got stuck in an airport overnight as my flight was cancelled due to weather, and I was starving because all the stores were closed. Some employee offered to show me where to get food, so I followed him. He then opened a door to outside in the parking lot and motioned outside. I quickly said no thanks and walked away. Got tired of a lot of drama around me, so moved into a house in the woods for a year alone. I was in a 5-year relationship that turned extremely toxic and abusive after the first 2 years. One day, we got into a really heated argument that was going nowhere but down. So I said, you know what? Duck this. I'm done. I packed up my stuff and just left without a second thought. That was nearly a year and a half ago. I'm doing much better today, and I'm in a significantly healthier relationship. I was traveling around Fiji and arrived at a hostel and got shown to the dorm. It smelled a bit weird, but thought nothing of it. The owner was super friendly, offered me food, and had some really cute puppies running around the sitting room. When I went back to the dorm to get something from my backpack, I noticed that the smell was puppy doo all over one end of the room, previously not visible from where I had been stood, with flies buzzing around it. On top of that, I then noticed fleas crawling on the bunk mattress, presumably from the cute puppies. I picked up my pack and left without saying anything. Felt a bit bad as I hadn't paid for the lunch, but it was massive nope moment. When I was 14, my first girlfriend of 1 or 2 weeks yelled at me for not doing coke with her and her sister because that meant I couldn't kick it and she didn't want to be held back like that. Then now, at 24, all I do is smoke weed, and she messaged me a long time ago, good thing you didn't do coke when we were younger because it would have been wasted on you. Very young girls in California that pride themselves on being drug addicts are disgusting. I got buried by heavy packages while loading a truck for FedEx. It took 3 people to get me out. I was bloody, bruised, and had trouble lifting my arm. My manager came over and chastised me for my package count being too low. Walked out immediately. I was at a party when I was a teen. Cops turned up. I was stuck upstairs in a room that may or may not have had suspicious substances. I can't recall. But there was a balcony and underneath a pool, and beyond the pool a gate leading to an alley. So I jumped in the pool. But when I resurfaced there were already 2 cops standing there looking at me. Back when I was in the Marines, I was stationed in Camp Lejeune, NC. I was out for the weekend and normally I got back kind of late, around 7 PM on Sunday. One weekend, I got back early. I grabbed my stuff, walked up the stairs to my barracks room and unlocked the door. My roommate was staring at me in shrill, wide-eyed terror. This took me aback, and I glanced over my shoulder because I thought my first sergeant was behind me or something. Nothing. I turned back and stopped. There it was, a pack of bologna sitting open on the floor, my bologna, half of which had been stuffed into his mattress. My eyes narrowed and lips pursed. Nothing in life prepared me for the moment where I would watch a man stuff a mattress with double meat. After a not so brief, awkward moment, he began to explain himself. Lunch. I put my hand up and nodded in slow contemplation. I pointed to the bologna. That's trash now, I replied before promptly closing the door and locking it again. I went down to the smoke pit, enjoyed a few drags, and went back upstairs where I found everything in order. I set my things down. My roommate again tried to explain himself. So, no, I shook my head. We're not going to talk about this. I have a friend in a long-term polyamorous relationship. It has always struck me as one-sided. She approves of all his proposed partners. He vetoes all of hers. Anyway, we were chatting about our issues, as close girlfriends do. I'm her friend, and I listen to her issues, and by extension, I'm obligated to listen to her boyfriend's issues. But suddenly I realize I'm listening to the issues of her boyfriend's 3 girlfriends, ex-boyfriend, and his family. Stop. I don't give a shit. I can barely stand listening about the boyfriend. Never mind all these ducked up strangers. I had been sleeping with a girl for a few weeks and was starting to take a shine to her. She told me she had to go to Chicago to see an old friend who was her high school sweetheart. Something was happening, maybe graduating from grad school. Not that, but something of a similar caliber to justify the trip. She returned to New York City after the long weekend, engaged to him. Ring and all. She apologized profusely, told me we could keep ducking, and that she'd break up with him in a few months when she'd fly back to Chicago and tell him that she had no intention of actually marrying him. She said that when he proposed, she just got stuck and couldn't say no. To top it off, she claimed they didn't have sex after getting engaged, but rather played the card game Gloom for several hours. Strangely, I believe her. Lightning struck a barn 25 meters away from our pool. While I was in it, I jumped clear out and went inside. I worked for a blood analysis lab machine company for about 6 months. Hated every minute of it because I was working well over 60 hours a week every week. I wouldn't be leaving some hospitals until after 11 p.m. sometimes. The management would never support the techs. The customer is always right. That BS. So one week during the over-the-phone team meeting, the manager actually asked one of the younger techs to complete paperwork and submit it, which is normal. But the manager was having him submit the repair paperwork and schedule the repair. When they got around to it, he wanted the tech to pencil whip documentation we submit to the FDA so he could a quarterly bonus. Managers whose group hits all the PMs gets a very nice size check. Had the tech done that and the machine failed before it was serviced, somebody could have died and he might have gone to jail. I left that job the next day. I wish I have had at least one manager that wasn't opposed. I quit a handful of jobs because of them. The one I have now is pretty great considering. I got involved in one of these outfits who do Amazon delivery, driving vans on routes delivering parcels. Lots of work during the pandemic. Advertised as a decent wage, and it was a change from what I'm used to doing, so I applied and wound up getting hired. I did a few days of training where I went on a route with a guy. My first actual day was a Saturday 7-day operation, and I had a lot of deliveries including lots of stuff that's going to rural areas. And this was in the dead of winter. The guy I trained with knocked out his deliveries within 5 or 6 hours most days. You're done when you're done. Or once it hits 9 p.m. Whichever comes first. You start at 8 a.m. I was out there for 13 hours. Almost got into 2 accidents. Had a panic attack. And my shift ended when I was on the phone with 911 after I drove the van down a snowed-in road that turned out to be a skidoo path on private property. I got that thing good and maroon broke off both side mirrors trying to reverse out. I hardly had any cell reception. Police got me out and drove me to a gas station where my panicked girlfriend picked me up. I went out the following day with the boss to collect the undelivered parcels and to assess how ducked the van was. I'll let him know that I'll be bowing out while we were driving to where I left the van, and he understood. Not the kind of work I'm cut out for. It would only be a matter of time before I wound up in a more serious incident, and if anything happened to me, I'd never forgive myself for putting myself in the situation. My old job was also allowing me to start working remotely, so now that I had that option, walking away from this job was easy. It was a dumb call going up the road I went up, but it was my first day and I was being pushed hard to make deliveries and keep the pace up. So I took on the risk that, and the pay was $110 a day, substantially less than advertised. So you have to drive like a maniac to make anywhere near a reasonable hourly wage. I don't even get the satisfaction of screwing biz off. The guy I worked for was definitely a small-time business owner, and he was struggling to keep the company going. Not a recommended gig if you have other options. It's a different kind of I'm out. But here's a story. I grew up in the Middle East. Naturally, when growing up in such a conflict, you go through things. Be it wars, rockets on your home, terrorist attacks, etc. The story takes place when I served in the army. I didn't take part in any active combat, but my experience left me scars that haven't healed. In the unit where I served, I couldn't trust my commanders or the people I was with at all. To the point where I had to cover my own ass all the time. It was better for me to avoid them by staying as far out of their way as possible and avoid answering my phone. Unlike a job, I couldn't just leave. It's not a job. You don't leave because you want to. It just doesn't work this way. So day in and day out, they tortured me psychologically. It became very, very bad. Eventually, due to the military restructuring, the unit was getting ready to close, which meant I was transferred to another base, and it was even worse there. One of the commanders really liked me, which was a relief, but the rest were trying their best to duck me over. Eventually, it all ended when I was discharged honorably. Surprisingly, there were many moments when I said, "Duck it, I'm out." I left the country 6 years ago. I was at a mental health job where a consumer had a history of suicide attempts. She had regular calls with me and we got along really well. She relied on the calls to keep her sanity. One day my boss pulled me off of the call and had me work with someone else who was low risk and super independent. This was despite my protests. I then asked her clinician to make the call in my place and remind her twice throughout the day. I also reminded the supervisor. She assured me she would. I called my consumer the next day to make sure she received a phone call, only to find out she never did, and she said that she attempted suicide because of it. Whether that was true or not, it drove me over the edge, because once again my concerns were not taken seriously, along with getting write-ups for making mistakes in the beginning, and getting a threat of being fired for someone taking unfinished notes from my desk and submitting them early. It was the last straw for me. I called my boyfriend, told him I was quitting, and threw my resignation on my supervisor's desk. One, to clarify the unfinished notes, I asked a coworker if I could write a note early and edit it later for submission, and he said as long as I didn't submit it, it should be fine. It was my fault for leaving it on my desk, but someone I'm suspecting my supervisor took them off my desk and submitted them for me. I tried to explain that I was doing what a coworker suggested and never submitted them. The coworker even came forward and defended me, but they refused to take it back. I was only there for 6 months, so I was still learning the job. The company had the policy of immediate warning and write-up if you did something wrong. There was no room for improvement, no being pulled aside and told how to improve. 3. I had a strong suspicion they were trying to push me out. There was a lot of bad practices going on and a lot of things I refused to do, like neglect more high-risk clients in favor of clients with higher independence and drive clients around for longer than their sessions were. I had a caseload of 31 and there were a lot of clients I had to cancel cause they made me pay taxi for clients who didn't need it. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.